By request, I knew Jeffrey Dahmer. My stepson just busted into the TV room and told me that I had to do this. It's become kind of a novelty amongst my friends and family, but for a short time in the 1990s I lived in the same apartment building as Jeffrey Dahmer and I even drank a beer with him once. Did you ever notice the smell? I've read that a lot of his neighbors complained about it. I started smelling something later on in my stay at the apartment building. As time went on I was working some pretty long shifts, so my apartment was basically just a place to sleep. The smell definitely became an issue as it got to be summer. It could only be described as a mixture of rotting meat and body odor. Honestly, the whole place was a shithole, so I wasn't surprised it started to stink, but I was plenty happy when I got out of there. How close was his unit to yours? Did you ever see anybody coming or going, or hear any suspicious noises? My apartment was a few away from his on the opposite side of the hall. Besides the occasional humming which we later found out was an electric saw being used for God knows what, he stayed pretty quiet. One time specifically, after a late shift, I saw a younger looking guy entering his apartment with him. They both looked extremely drunk, but it wasn't strange at the time. When did your "something is very wrong here" feeling turned out to be true? Not my story, but pretty classic Reddit, so I'm reposting here. Originally posted by in this thread 5 years ago. It was near Halloween time when my friends and I were telling ghost stories. My friend said she was going to tell a story about her parents' first date. She said she didn't like telling the story since it was actually true, but we prodded her on. To cut to the chase, the parents had spent a nice, if awkward first date, and around the time that they would have said goodnight, the male in the situation, my friend's dad, suggested that they go for a midnight hike up Provo Canyon. He apparently knew the place since he had done a fair amount of rock climbing in the area. So the two drove up the mouth of the canyon, got out of their cars and started hiking under just the light of the stars since it was a new moon. Years later, after being married for some time, they were watching an interview with the serial killer, Ted Bundy. In response to a question asking him to describe the time that he felt the closest to being caught, he explained about the night that he lured a girl into Provo Canyon and had just killed her when he heard some people coming up the trail. He explained how he hid in the trees just in time, only to watch some guy walk right into the body and for some reason, just turn around and walk away. Friend's parents stumbled into a fresh corpse left by Ted Bundy on their first date. The day I learned of Colleen Stan, a woman who was abducted and used as a sex slave, kept locked in a box 23 hours a day for 7 years. The Wikipedia article has the full story, but basically they convinced Stan of an organization called The Company and said they would torture her and her family if she ever tried to escape. Because she was so afraid of this group, her captor gave her a surprising amount of freedom, even let her see her family once, and she never tried to escape. He then decided he gave her too much freedom and put her back in the box, but the captor's wife told Stan that her husband didn't actually work for the organization. Stan then escaped and called her captor, breaking up with him. She returned to her family but didn't call the cops to give her captor a chance to reform himself at the wife's request. His wife eventually confessed to the police her husband's actions, saying he brainwashed her since they first met and testified against him in exchange for full immunity.